Alrighty, it's a new year and the possibilities are endless. All kinds of new and exciting movies are coming out. In addition, many great TV shows, such as Hannibal, Vikings, and Game of Thrones, are returning to screens. However, before any of that, we have to get through January, which is notorious for being the month of horrible movies. Granted, we occasionally get an exception. For instance, Jack Ryan was okay. But for the most part, a film that comes out in January is guaranteed to be terrible. This year, instead of wasting my time with Taken 3, how about I tackle something that hits me on a much more personal level? I don't think many people will dispute that Dragonball Evolution is awful, failing not just as an adaptation of its source material, but also as a movie in itself. Fans and casual viewers generally hate it about as much as The Last Airbender, another movie that tarnished the original work. While that film is a little worse, I have a more personal hatred for this one, which feels like a spiteful slap in the face to Akira Toriyama and all of his fans. It seems like the only research that the filmmakers did was a Google image search. They literally get nothing right. It's not like Dragon Ball is high art. There are numerous aspects and plot points that make little to no sense, but it was charming and fun in its embrace of adventure and fighting. This film has no such charm. The story revolves around a cheerful boy named Goku, who lives a solitary life in the woods and uses the martial arts skills that his late grandfather taught him to... Oh, I'm sorry. I got it confused with the good version. In actuality, the story focuses on an introverted teenager named Goku, who struggles to make it through high school while trying to master the martial arts techniques that his grandfather Gohan teaches him. When the Earth is threatened by the Demon Lord Piccolo, Goku is tasked with collecting 7 mystical objects called Dragon Balls. When gathered together, they have the power to summon Shenlong, a dragon with the power to grant one wish. Along the way, Goku is joined by the tech-savvy Bulma and Muten Roshi, his grandfather's teacher. Let's start with the first and most significant problem: the characters. Here, Goku is a whiny little pissant who cares about personal gain and popularity. While Justin Chatwin can be serviceable in the right role, he is completely miscast and downright horrible as this character. I'm not saying that solely because he bears no resemblance to Goku. He just gives a lousy performance. Not one word or phrase that he utters resonates with any believable conviction or verisimilitude. Blame it on the script if you want, but the fact is that he is not a likable main character. If Goku is anything, it's likable. He's innocent, outgoing, confident, and constantly eager to push his limits and get stronger. Sure, he's naive and stupid, but he always strives to use his abilities for good and never worries about trivial matters such as popularity or revenge. Even as an adult, he still maintained his humble values and was still recognizable as the same character despite being more mature. What's more, he inspired confidence with his positive outlook on life. You felt like you could believe in the guy. This thing utterly fails to represent any of Goku's signature qualities. The portrayal is fundamentally wrong. Some of you might say, "Oh, you're just a fanboy who is picking on the movie version because it's not exactly like the original character." No, that could not be farther from the truth. When it comes to adaptations, I'm usually extremely open to interpretation. Take the character of Thorin Oakenshield from The Hobbit. Richard Armitage looks radically different from how the Dwarf King is described in the book, but I was able to look past that because of the performance. He still felt like Thorin in his personality and motivations. Armitage and the filmmakers clearly cared about and understood the character and maintained his essence. Another literary character that was changed for the movies was Victor Frankenstein in the Hammer horror films. Peter Cushing's rendition had none of the remorse or sadness that the character had in the book. However, the core of Frankenstein is his ambition. He represents what would happen if man was to play God, which is something that Cushing brought to life beautifully and why his version is my favorite. The filmmakers took risks with these two characters, but the risks paid off. The changes made to Goku seem to have been motivated by a misguided desire to make him more relatable, but in doing so, they took away his likability and originality by making him just another teenager filled with angst. The other characters don't fare much better. Bulma uses guns and tries to be intense, though not very credibly. Originally, she was very much the damsel in distress, constantly having to be saved by Goku or one of the other fighters. Although this didn't do much for feminism or female empowerment, it was a role that she felt the most comfortable in. She never had any aspirations of becoming a great fighter like her friends. She was confident in who she was and what she could contribute. Additionally, she made up for her lack of martial arts expertise with moral support, extensive knowledge, and technological resources. Now, I like Emmy Rossum. She's a very talented actress, a great singer, and seems to have a fun personality. But since the filmmakers decided to reimagine Bulma as this Lara Croft wannabe, she speaks all of her lines in a somewhat raspy voice in an attempt to sound edgy. She just comes off as dull and somewhat pandering. Next, we have Chow Yun-fat as Roshi. Honestly, he's fine. Master Roshi may be a wise warrior, but he is also a dirty old man. He's basically what would happen if Woody Allen was a martial arts master. It's the balance between these two traits that makes the character so memorable. The script doesn't do him any favors, but Chow Yun-fat plays it about as well as he can. Amusingly hammy at times and wisely serious when he needs to be. However, I have to ask, why does Gohan look about 30 years older? At least in the manga and the anime, they look about the same age, further justifying it by saying that Roshi drank the immortality elixir. Just go with it. Last time I checked, masters are generally older than their students, not the other way around. Moving on, we have June Park as Yamcha, who is simultaneously bland and annoying. Aside from sounding like Zigbar from Kingdom Hearts,
Yamcha, at your service.
As if.
This character has no distinguishing qualities and contributes nothing to the story. Granted, Yamcha didn't really have much dignity as a girl-shy bandit, but I'm sure he has some fans out there who are displeased. Speaking of superfluous characters, Jamie Chung plays Chi-Chi, who is not nearly as entertainingly overbearing as her anime counterpart and only serves as the obligatory love interest. Hey, do you know which character that they could have included instead? Krillin. Part of me is glad that they didn't defile him like the others, but he's one of the most important characters in the entire saga. He's Goku's best friend and first rival, but this movie cuts him out in favor of surfer dude Yamcha and not Chi-Chi. Eventually, the heroes come across Ernie Hudson? He instructs them on performing a technique to seal up the Demon Lord. Huh. I would make a Ghostbusters joke, but let's face it, you've already made one. Lastly, we have James Marsters as Piccolo, who is on the same boat as Roshi in that he's one of the characters that they screw up the least. True, he looks more like a Romulan than a Namekian, but you can see him and say, that's Piccolo. This is fitting because Marsters is actually a fan of the source material. Poor sap. Unfortunately, despite looking relatively accurate, the main villain is utterly devoid of personality and motivation. In the original story, he sought the Dragon Balls to restore his youth and rule the world. It was simple yet effective. He was a power-hungry despot who delighted in the suffering of others. When you think about it, many of Toriyama's villains get by on pure sadism and ambition, which was probably why Piccolo Jr. was far more interesting. But I digress. Here, though, we never learn what Piccolo's goals are. I guess he wants to rule the world, but this is never properly developed. Also, he barely says a word, so we know absolutely nothing about his character. It doesn't help that he doesn't actually encounter Goku until the climax, which robs the movie of a compelling hero-villain dynamic. Look, this isn't Sauron, who was more of a spiritual and symbolically evil being who had legions of followers to spread his influence over 6 movies. Piccolo is a physical presence. The fact that he has no discernible personality or motivation makes him a very boring antagonist. You can't even enjoy this as a mindless popcorn flick, as the action scenes are not the least bit impressive. This is one of the cardinal problems of this movie when you look back on the Dragon Ball franchise as a whole. The fight scenes are one of the most memorable aspects, fast-paced and using a combination of martial arts and destructive energy blasts. Here, everyone looks like they're on a wire, resulting in the hand-to-hand combat feeling stilted and awkward. As for the energy attacks, while I admit that it would be tricky to render something like this and make it look convincing, the ki blasts look laughably bad, resembling something out of a straight-to-video film rather than a big-budget blockbuster. The terrible effects don't stop there, though, as there are numerous CG environments that lack depth and look like a cheap green screen backdrop. Aside from that, the movie as a whole is just poorly written. None of the dialogue feels natural in the slightest, containing all manner of cringeworthy one-liners and wooden exposition. In addition, the tone is too grim, sacrificing the lighthearted atmosphere of the source material in order to tell a humorless tale of seriousness. Yes, because green alien men, over-the-top action, energy blasts, and wish-granting dragons deserve to be portrayed with gritty intensity. This is silly, and Akira Toriyama knew that when he created it. His story could get fairly serious and dramatic at points, but it was balanced out with the author's unique brand of humor and adventurous atmosphere. And now, to indulge my inner fan, I will go over the numerous details from the manga that are portrayed incorrectly here. Who came up with the idea of putting Goku in high school? The first part of this travesty focuses on him sitting quietly in a classroom, daydreaming about Chi-Chi, and dealing with one-dimensional bullies who would make Biff Tannen blush. Frankly, it hurts. Goku's son ended up going to high school and pursuing a scholarly career, and he became less interesting in the process. They further destroy the character here by having him humiliate the bullies for his own satisfaction. Don't you just love this guy? Why do the capsule devices look like something out of Transformers? Why does this movie feel the need to tie Ozaru in with Piccolo? They have no connection in the original story. Ozaru is the giant ape that Goku changes into when he looks at the full moon. When he does this in the movie, Piccolo's command induces the transformation. Goku doesn't have a tail, so he shouldn't be able to do this. Why is Ozaru much smaller than his manga and anime counterpart? The CGI sucks either way, but at least make him the right size. Why does this movie sacrifice the tragic irony surrounding Gohan's death by simply making Piccolo the murderer? Yeah, spoiler alert, Grandpa Gohan dies. We can bury him next to Uncle Ben, Jor-El, and the Waynes. In actuality, Goku unknowingly crushes his grandfather after accidentally looking at the full moon and changing into the aforementioned giant ape. In the manga, the story behind this is kept a mystery until Dragon Ball Z rolls around, in which we learn that Goku is really an alien, a member of a warrior race called the Saiyans, who can all transform into giant apes and use this ability to conquer planets. Why does the movie equate ki blasts with airbending? Yeah, wrong franchise. Speaking of which, the Kamehameha has gone from a destructive wave of energy to whatever the writer wants it to be. Sometimes it can be used to light candles, other times it can be used for resuscitation. The only instance that remains somewhat accurate to the source material comes when not Goku uses it to defeat Piccolo. Even there they get it wrong. In the series, Goku periodically uses the Kamehameha wave to propel himself in the opposite direction of where he fires it. Here, not Goku inexplicably jumps at Piccolo while simultaneously shooting the energy attack at him. I suppose you could call these nitpicks, but the sheer amount of them really calls into question whether or not the filmmakers actually cared about what they were adapting. The short answer, they didn't. So, do I hate this for being an exceedingly poor adaptation of Dragon Ball? Well, yes, but my contempt also stems from the fact that it is a terrible film on its own. Even if you disregard the lack of faithfulness to the original story, this movie still fails on nearly every artistic level. The acting is wooden and uninspired, the effects look shockingly cheap, the action sequences are poorly done and unexciting, the dialogue is downright awful, the story and characters are not the least bit compelling, the direction lacks finesse and confidence, and there is a noticeable shortage of passion from nearly everyone involved. Looking back at adaptations like The Princess Bride, the DC Animated Universe, the Harry Potter series, the Middle-earth saga, Jurassic Park, the Jesse Stone movies, and The Searchers, you can sense that the people involved want to be there, determined to make the best film possible and do right by the source material. Watching this movie, you get the impression that none of these people had any real love for the original story. If you don't want to take my word for it, just look at some of the people who have been working with the franchise for years. Kyle A. Bear didn't like it, Vic Mignogna didn't like it, Sean Schemmel and Sonny Strait didn't even bother with it, Christopher R. Sabat enjoyed it in the sense that it was easy to make fun of, and even Akira Toriyama couldn't find much to defend, as he felt that, quote, the script had too little of a grasp on the world and its characteristics. That should tell you something.